Thank you for letting me be part of today. It's the second conference I've been to, and I've sat through another session, so I'm learning a bit more. I'm getting a bit more knowledgeable, but I'm afraid I am of that age where no matter how public my jobs have been, the thought of my maths being on that screen was a bit frightening. So that's it. Look, what I wanted to do is look at this in a policy context, because I'm not a teacher now, I'm not a school leader, but I have been around a few years, and the older I get, the more important I think it is that if you're looking to change something, you know where you've come from, you know why you're changing, and you know where you want to go. And that's what my years in politics taught me, that it's not that teachers don't like change, and it's not that they're not prepared to change. What drives them mad is if a change comes out of nowhere with no explanation as to what's gone wrong so that they've got to change, what the options were so you could decide how to change, and what you're trying to achieve. That's what I felt when I was a teacher, and yet when I became a politician, I actually, you might not believe this, but I did see more continuity to the changes than politicians ever managed to explain to teachers. Does that make sense? So my sort of great thing, the thing I'm working on at the moment is, if only both policymakers and teachers could share that narrative of change over the years, we'd realise we're on the same side and not trying to make life difficult for each other. And what I wanted to do in the 5 or 10 minutes I've got today is to just very brief, and nothing complicated, but just make you think why we're here, how come we've got here in this process of change, why is this a decent thing to consider, and where might it go? Does that sort of make sense? So if I look back to the great period of change, I always start history in 1988, and I know history didn't start then, but I do sort of think that with that Great Education Act, and certainly for this generation of teachers, that's where our corporate experience takes us back to. So there's a fair number of us still who were teaching in 1988, and some of us like Kevin and I were teaching just a year or two earlier than that. But look, I think what happened to begin with, what policymakers always tried to do, it was structural change. Think about it. If you can't sleep one night, you're having difficulty getting to sleep, just try counting the different types of schools we've had since the 1944 Education Act. So if you start at grammar, technical, and secondary modern, and work your way forward to multi-academy trust, there's 20-30. And every one of them, you just think what it meant. It wasn't just about changing the sign on the gate. It was a massive upheaval in the structure of a school in terms of the governance, the jobs and everything like that. It was structural change. So we went for years as policymakers thinking that how you brought about improvement was to change the structure of the school. And I spent my early childhood and teenage years and early political years believing that was true. I thought if only we had comprehensive education and didn't have selective education, well, then our problems would be solved. So I'm not criticising other people. We've all been through that journey of thinking, well, there's structural change. And I think we got a lot from that. I always think, there's not many changes where we can't take something from, and I think we benefited from that. But I think what we then went to, sort of when the Labour government came in 97, so we went from that idea of, selection or non-selection, private schools, non-private schools. What were the great big initiatives of the Labour government then? Literacy hour, numeracy hour, Key Stage 3, all the things I spent my early ministerial career in. And again, I think we got a lot from them. But I didn't sort of hear teachers shouting out, hallelujah, they've got it right, this is absolutely the right approach. But it was a big change, just think about it. Because what the policymakers were then saying was, hang on, it might not be changing the structure that's the absolute key to success. It might be what you do in the classroom. And that was a big change, because prior to that, there wasn't an awful lot in terms of policy about how you should teach. There'd been a lot about what you should teach in the national curriculum, about how we should measure success in the national assessment, about how we should inspect. But what actually went on in the classroom was sort of fairly new in the mid-90s. And that, we learnt a lot from that. I defend our having done that, to my dying day probably. But wow, it had disadvantages. What were the disadvantages? You go around conferences like that, and teachers would say, you take them a professionalism away. I may as well just be a technician or a craftsperson, not that there's anything wrong with that. But there's a feeling of we're doing what we're told, and that the policy itself of the literacy hour and the numeracy hour had no give for the individual circumstances of your classroom. So you had to do the hour every day. You had to split the hour up into component 15-minute parts, and you had to teach to age-level tests. And again, we got something from that, but it had huge problems. And I think that was sort of the next phase. So we'd been from this structural change, but we then got into that very, very heavy government-led down initiatives. So what did we do next? You remember, you take us a bit on in policymakers, say, oh, yes, government's too top-down, we are too instructed. Trust the professionals. We'll leave it to you. So if you look at that policy from about 2006, 2007 onwards, it was almost, but they didn't say it this way, do what you want. It really is almost do what you want. Almost back to my early teaching days when we did do what we wanted. And I can see why that happened. It was a response to that feeling from teachers that said, trust us. We know our kids, we know our subject, we know our classrooms. Trust us to get on with it. Was that the answer? No, we got a bit from it. What my problem with that is that we're human beings, our profession. Teachers are human beings. And we're not all brilliant all of the time. And there was no safety net for us all on a poor day or poor teachers most of the time. And there wasn't that sharing of best practice because we didn't know what everyone was doing. And so in my mind, sort of that's the policy matrix we've been through. Structural change would be school improvement. Yes, a bit, but not completely. Government knows best. We'll tell you how to teach. Got a lot from that, but didn't solve the problem. Okay, trust the teachers to get on with it. All right, it took us back to saying to teachers, you're professionals, but I wasn't confident that there was a best of practice in every classroom in every school in this country. And what I think I want to argue, why I like LBQ so much, I think it's got the best of those important periods of change. If you think about it, it's not telling you what to do. When I first saw it, I saw a bank of questions. Oh, this is the literacy hour reborn. This is work your way through the questions and you'll get Valhalla at the end of the set of questions. And then when I went in to see it happen, it's not that. But neither is it actually saying to teachers, do it by yourself without any checks or with any guidance. And if you can somehow give teachers autonomy and give them the freedom and the flexibility to exercise professional judgment in their own classrooms, to meet the needs of their children, because they do know their children best. But if side by side with that, you can put in some safety net structure that means what they've got is the best quality information to make those decisions, I think you create something different. Does that make sense? And for me, that's what LBQ does. There's no doubt about it, that I want to say something about technology at the end. There's no doubt about it that, you know, to be honest, if you put me in front of that class with those sets of questions, it would not be a good lesson. This does not give you a good lesson without a good teacher in control, exercising decisions about the classroom. So it's not by itself an answer. It's got to be matched by the quality of teaching. But equally, if you look at that from the teacher's point of view, why does it mean that the teacher's more likely to teach effectively? For all those reasons you've seen today. Just it gives you the data in a way that's manageable so you can make effective decisions. And what the evidence does tell us is that marking has very little effect on the progress of children, but feedback is one of the best things you can do for school improvement and raising standards. So it doesn't ask you to mark, but it gives you the information to give excellent feedback. And I think that's the holy grail, really, if you can get that. If teachers can feel that they're professionals, that they've been treated with respect, that they can respond to their classroom with their children at any minute of the day, but you're actually saying what you do matters. Your decisions about pedagogy are absolutely crucial to what happens in your classroom. So here's some things to help you do that better. I think you somehow marry what we've been trying to learn
over the last 30 years. I just want to say two more things, because it was one of your speakers, Kevin, that I think it was Stephen who said that. If it wasn't, apologise to the two. But look, this is not the finished product. And when I think back over my years in education, some of the reasons we've had an idea, then dropped it, is we gave it no growing space. We didn't nurture it. We didn't sow seeds and say, come on, we floated it. Let's give it a try. Let's see how it grows. And let's be brave enough and honest enough to say what worked and to say what didn't work and to adapt it. Because politics doesn't work like that. It's got to succeed or it goes out of the window. We've never had that dialogue, quality dialogue between teachers and policymakers, so we could do that. You know, recent history is probably littered with myriad of good ideas. If only we'd have given them space to grow, they might have actually turned onto something. Now, LBQ has got space to grow. And I think anybody who's been involved in LBQ from the start could be able to tell you that story of how they've changed their mind, of how they've learnt what works better, of how they've got the feedback from teachers as to what you could do next. But the trick here is, you know it's got space to grow. If LBQ comes to you next year and says, we've learnt this, you're not going to say, you're changing your mind again. You told us last year it was this. It's a bit like a growth mindset, I think, that it's got room to grow. And I do think that that's very important. The last point I want to make is about IT, because you're absolutely right. I'm of that generation that doesn't find using IT, let alone teaching with it, that's important. And I think there's a trick to this. I know it's IT. I know it's IT. But I'm not frightened about it because I think it's more pedagogy than it is IT. Does that make sense? So when you say, come and see LBQ, I think what you've just said to me is come and have a conversation about how you can teach more effectively. I don't think you've just said to me, come and I'll show you how I can teach you to use a computer absolutely brilliantly. Because if you said that to me, I'd think I couldn't do it. But if you say to me, got some ways that we might help you to teach more effectively, I'll give anything a go. But at my age, well, you have to ask me, the nation's children are safe from that. But that might be true of some of your teachers as well. You're not saying to the teachers, let me show you what a computer can do. You're saying to the teachers, let me show you something that can help you teach more effectively. So it's growing. I suspect it won't stay like that. We'll learn more things about technology. Kevin and the EF will give us more information about what works. So it has the potential to change, but it can change without having to start again. And I think one of the problems we've had in recent years in policy making is if we've changed, we've always wanted to give the impression we've got to start again. And in truth, my view is that there's that line of policy making that takes us through from not interested because we thought teaching was about being born a teacher and you couldn't be taught to be a teacher. That's where we started. Through structural change, through top-down government initiatives, to leaving the teachers to get on with it and trusting them, and somehow now trying to actually get the best of those things together in the interests of kids. And when I came to write my notes on this yesterday, because I think it's got my starting point, when I'd just written a few notes down, I've noticed the first line I put was school improvement. Because unless it all links back to school improvement, you're not going to sell it to your teachers. I do think at the end of the day, it's good to see the results coming through. It is about school improvement. And the last word is it's about time, because I do think time's important. And I know one of the reasons Tony set this up is because in his role as chair of governors in the school he works, he could see that the time pressure on teachers, drove them mad, was driving people out of the profession, and at the end of the day was meaning what should go on in the classroom wasn't going on in the classroom. And he's right about this, and this saves you time. But I would take that a step further and say that my experience is that teachers have never minded how much time they give to the job. It's time that they think's a waste of time that actually causes them to leave the profession, not time that's used to best effect. So I'm holding back on this. I think you could get quite hooked into this. And I think you might think, where's all that extra time I'm meant to have? But I still think that it's more effective use of time. And I think we're all professionals in this room. I've never met anybody yet who minds putting the time in because it's not effective use of time. So Tony, it's come on another year since this, and it's great. Thicker books, more questions than the rest of it, so that's been great. And I wish you well in your endeavours with whatever you do.